The last thing his mother ever said to him on this land was spoken on a Tuesday morning in October, over a cup of coffee she held with both hands, watching the fields the way she always did, like they were saying something only she could hear. "Jack," she'd said quietly, "a man who knows where home is never truly loses his way." He hadn't understood it then. He understood it now. Because he was sitting in a truck at the end of his parents' driveway in Mill Haven, Oregon, and he hadn't been able to make himself drive the last 200 yards for 11 minutes. 6:47 in the morning. The sky was cold ash, pale and flat, stretched thin across the fields like it hadn't decided yet whether to let the sun through. His hands were around the steering wheel the way a drowning man holds a rope, not to steer anywhere, just to hold on. Rex sat beside him in the passenger seat. The German Shepherd hadn't made a sound since they'd left the motel. He just sat there, heavy and warm, his broad head resting gently on Jack's forearm, not asking anything, not pushing, just present, the way Rex always was, like he understood that some silences needed company more than they needed breaking. Jack stared at the farmhouse. The roofline sagged on the left side, exactly the way it had sagged 10 years ago when he'd stood in this same driveway after the funeral, suitcase in one hand, orders in the other, telling himself he'd come back when he was ready. The porch railing he and his father had built together one summer, just the two of them, sawdust and coffee in the air, his father's big hands guiding his, was still there, crooked, tired, still standing. His throat closed around something heavy. Rex shifted slightly against his arm, barely a movement, but Jack felt it the way you feel a hand on your shoulder in a dark room. He exhaled, long, slow, unsteady. "Shoulda come back sooner," he said quietly. Rex didn't move, didn't make a sound, but he stayed. And somehow, in that cold gray morning, with 10 years of silence pressing down on everything, that was enough to make Jack finally reach forward and turn the engine off. Welcome back to Jack and Rex Tales, where every story reminds us that the things we run from the longest are often the things we needed most. I'm glad you're here today. Jack Thompson was 50 years old. Retired United States Navy SEAL, 22 years of service, deployments, missions, things he carried in his chest that had no names and never would. He was built like a man who had learned that the body could endure almost anything. It was the quiet moments that were harder. He had no wife, no children, no address that felt like home. What he had was Rex, a 7-year-old German Shepherd adopted from a veterans canine program. A dog who had served his own tours and come home carrying his own kind of silence. They understood each other without explanation. That was enough for both of them. The letter had arrived 6 weeks ago. Plain envelope, county seal in the corner. Final notice. 30 days to satisfy outstanding property tax debt, where the land will be scheduled for public auction. Jack had read it 3 times in a gas station parking lot in Nevada. Then he'd folded it carefully and sat in the truck for a long time without moving. The farm had belonged to his parents, Thomas and Eleanor Thompson. Good, quiet people who rose before dawn and worked past dark and never complained because they believed the land gave back exactly what you put into it. They had died on a January night 10 years ago, black ice on Route 12, a truck they never saw coming. Jack had made it back for the funeral, stood at their graves in his dress uniform, cover in his hands, and felt something inside him go very still. Something that hadn't fully moved since. He couldn't stay after. Standing in that farmhouse without his mother's coffee on the stove and his father's boots beside the door felt like standing inside a wound that hadn't closed. So he left, kept leaving, until staying gone became the only thing he knew how to do, until there was nowhere left to go. He stepped out of the truck into the cold. Rex landed beside him, nose already working, reading everything before reacting to anything. Jack walked toward the house and stopped. The east fence, leaning badly the last time he'd seen it, stood straight and solid, new posts set deep into the ground. The porch railing had been reinforced, the rotting front steps replaced with clean timber, and from the chimney, thin but steady, a line of pale smoke curled into the morning air. Jack stood very still. This place should have been empty, broken, exactly as he'd left it. Instead, it looked like someone had been quietly, stubbornly keeping it alive. He walked to the front door and raised his hand to knock. It opened before his knuckles touched the wood. 2 women stood in the doorway. Same face, same dark, watchful eyes. Twins, late 20s. The one on the left stepped forward immediately, positioning herself in front of her sister, the way people do when protection has become instinct. Chin up, eyes steady. But her hands pressed flat against her thighs, the way hands press flat when they're working hard not to tremble. "Stop right there," she said. "You need to leave." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Jack said. "I don't care why you're here. You need to go." Rex stepped into the light beside Jack. The second woman flinched, then caught herself and went still. Jack reached slowly into his jacket. Both women tensed at the exact same moment, shoulders drawing up, bodies going rigid, and Jack recognized that reaction with a quiet heaviness in his chest. He had seen it in harder places. It was what happened to people who had learned that sudden movements from strangers rarely meant anything good. He moved deliberately slowly, pulled out folded papers, and held them out at arm's length. "My name is Jack Thompson," he said. "This land belonged to my parents." The words didn't come out loud. They came out heavy, like setting something down after carrying it a very long way. The woman took the papers, read them, passed them to her sister. A long silence passed between them, not empty, but full of things being rearranged. "We didn't know," she finally said. The hardness in her voice was still there, but something beneath it had cracked open. "We thought it was abandoned." Her name was Anna. Her sister was Hannah. They told him simply, without asking for sympathy, that they had found the farm 5 years ago with nothing. No home, no family, a man who was supposed to protect them, who had decided one day they were more burden than he was willing to carry. Anna had been pregnant. The system had already failed them once, so when they found the old farmhouse, broken and freezing, they hadn't left. They stayed, fixed what they could, built something out of what had been left behind, not because it was easy, because there was nowhere else to go. Jack listened to all of it without speaking. Then the back door burst open.
Small boots hit the kitchen floor at a full run, and a boy, no older than 6, dark-haired, face set with total seriousness, came around the corner holding a carved wooden rifle at his shoulder, eyes sweeping the room like a soldier clearing a building. He stopped when he saw Jack, leveled the wooden rifle directly at him. "Don't move," the boy said with all the authority a 6-year-old could manufacture. "I mean it." Jack looked at him for a long, careful moment. Then he raised both hands slowly above his shoulders. "All right," Jack said with complete solemnity. "You got me, son." The boy's eyes narrowed, searching hard for the trick in it. Rex moved then. No sudden motion, no sound. He simply lowered himself to the floor a few feet from the child, not close enough to crowd him, not far enough to feel distant, rested his chin on his front paws, and looked up at the boy with those calm, dark, patient eyes. The boy stared at Rex. His grip on the wooden rifle loosened without him seeming to notice.
He took one step forward, then another. Then he reached out one small hand, careful, trusting, the way children reach when something in them has decided before their mind has caught up. Rex didn't move toward him. He simply waited, completely still, letting the boy come the rest of the way, letting it be entirely the child's choice. The boy's fingers found the top of Rex's broad head. Rex closed his eyes slowly, the way dogs do when something feels exactly right. Something in that kitchen released all at once. Anna's breath came out in a long, quiet exhale. Hannah looked away for just a moment, and Jack stood with his hand still half raised and felt something loosen behind his sternum that he hadn't known was pulled so tight. The boy's name was Travis, 6 years old, self-appointed head of security. He had been doing the job for some time and took it completely seriously. That night, the 5 of them sat around the kitchen table: Jack, Anna, Hannah, Travis, and a quiet woman named Ellie who spoke rarely but cooked like she believed she could take care of everyone through warmth and food alone. Rex lay under the table near Travis's feet, receiving covert pieces of bread that Travis believed no one could see. Jack set the tax notice on the table. 30 days, he said. After that, the county takes this land. He looked at each of them. I have enough to cover the back taxes. You can all stay, but not like this, not hiding, not waiting for someone to come take it. We do this together, and we do it right. All of us. Silence settled over the table. Then Travis looked up from his covert operation and said with complete calm, I already fixed the gate on the south fence. Anna stared at him. You're 6. Travis considered this briefly. It wasn't that complicated, he said. Jack looked down at the table and pressed his lips together very carefully. 3 days later, Ray Turner came. He arrived just after dusk, clean truck, clean boots, unhurried. The kind of man who let his patience do the threatening for him. Anna had dealt with him twice before Jack arrived. Both times he'd left her feeling smaller than when he came, without raising his voice once or making a single direct threat. He hadn't needed to. He knocked. Jack opened the door. Something moved across Ray's face in that first second, a careful, rapid recalculation. His eyes read Jack the way experienced men read rooms. The smile stayed in place, but something behind it shifted. Didn't realize anyone had come back, Ray said pleasantly. Now you do, Jack said. The tax situation being what it is, I wanted to make sure whoever was here understood their options. There are buyers who'd move fast, make it clean for everyone. I'm sure there are, Jack said. He held out the deed and the tax payment confirmation, processed 2 days prior, quietly, using the last of what he had. Ray took the papers, read them slowly. The smile held with considerable discipline, but stopped reaching his eyes entirely. He stood a moment longer than necessary, not ready to leave, not willing to show it, and in that pause something moved across his face that wasn't anger or strategy. It was something almost like recognition, like a man who had built his life on finding what others had left behind, standing for the first time in front of someone who had come back for it. He handed the papers back. Looks like you've got it handled, he said quietly. He nodded once, walked to his truck without hurrying, drove down the gravel road, and didn't look back. Anna stood just behind Jack's shoulder, watching the taillights disappear. That's really it? She said. That's it, Jack said. She was quiet a moment, then, why did you use your own money? You didn't owe us anything. Jack watched the last dust settle on the empty road. My father built that fence, he said. My mother planted those fields. A pause. I wasn't going to let it go to a man who saw it as nothing more than an opportunity. The weeks that followed were the hardest, honest work Jack had done in years. He fixed what was structurally broken. Anna worked the land like she knew it, Hannah managed every dollar with quiet precision. Ellie kept the house warm. Travis followed Rex from sunrise to sunset with the loyalty of a soldier who had found his commanding officer and had no intention of reassignment. And Rex went where he was needed, by the door on uncertain nights, beside Travis when the boy woke from bad dreams, next to Jack in the early mornings when the memories got loud, and the only thing that helped was knowing something steady was close. It didn't feel like a family being built. It felt like one being remembered back into existence. The tax payment cleared on a quiet Wednesday, no ceremony. Hannah set the confirmation letter on the kitchen table, and Travis studied it with great seriousness and then looked at Jack. "So we won?" he asked. Jack looked at the boy, then at the house around them, his mother's window, his father's worn floors, the walls that strangers had patched and kept warm through winters when Jack couldn't bring himself to return. "Yeah," Jack said softly, "we're home." That evening, Jack sat on the porch as the sun went down across the Oregon fields, the same fields his mother had watched every morning, the same sky his father had read for weather every evening of his life. Rex lay pressed warm against his leg, and the air smelled like turned earth and chimney smoke, and something Jack didn't have a word for, but recognized as the smell of a place where people were living honestly. The screen door opened behind him. Small boots. Travis came out and sat on the step just below Jack without asking permission, consistent with his general approach to most situations. He looked out at the fields for a long moment, quiet in the way children are quiet when they're carrying something bigger than usual. "My mom says you used to live here when you were little," Travis said. "I did," Jack said. "Why'd you leave?" Jack looked at the fields his father had worked and his mother had loved and he had run from for 10 years. "I thought I was running towards something," he said quietly. "Took me a long time to understand I was running away instead." Travis turned this over carefully. Then, "Rex never runs away." Jack looked down at Rex. Rex looked back up at him. Steady, patient, with those ancient, calm eyes that had never once looked at Jack with anything other than complete presence. "No," Jack said, "he never does." Travis's small weight pressed warm and trusting against his leg. Travis leaned back against Jack's leg, fully, without hesitation, with the complete, unguarded trust of a child who has finally decided something is safe, and Jack went very still, afraid to disturb even the air around it. Inside, Ellie was humming. Hannah laughed at something Anna said, warm and unguarded, the laugh of someone who had forgotten for a moment to be careful. The fields turned gold in the last of the light. Jack Thompson, 50 years old, retired Navy SEAL, a man who had spent a decade running from the one place that had always been his, sat on his father's porch with a boy leaning trustingly against his leg and a dog pressed warm against his side, and he felt, for the first time in 10 years, completely still. Not empty still. Full still. His mother's words came back then, quiet and clear across all those years. A man who knows where home is never truly loses his way. "I thought my life ended here," Jack said softly. Rex didn't move. Travis's small weight pressed warm and trusting against his leg. "Turns out," Jack whispered, "it was just waiting for me to come back."
That is what the land his parents left him was always meant to be. Not just soil and fences and a roofline that needed fixing. It was room. Room for people with nowhere else to go. Room for a boy who needed something solid to lean against. Room for a man who had run far enough and long enough that coming home at 50 years old on a cold Oregon morning turned out to be the bravest thing he had ever done. Because real courage doesn't always look like a mission. Sometimes it looks like turning off an engine, walking up a gravel driveway, raising your hands for a 6-year-old boy with a wooden rifle, staying when everything in you has been trained for years to go. If this story moved something in you, if you believe that loyalty still matters, that kindness still matters, that second chances are still worth fighting for, then you belong here with us every week. Subscribe to Jack and Rex Tales, because every story we tell comes back to the same quiet truth. The bravest thing a person can do is come home. The educational and significant value in this story. This story carries meaningful value that reaches far beyond entertainment. It speaks honestly about grief and avoidance, showing that running from pain is deeply human, but that healing only truly begins when we find the courage to face what we left behind. For older American viewers carrying their own unresolved losses or regrets, that message arrives not as a lecture, but as quiet, hard-earned permission. It honors the dignity of survival without romanticizing hardship. Anna and Hannah did not wait to be rescued. They found something broken and made it livable through will and determination, reflecting a fundamental American value of self-reliance that older viewers recognize deeply in themselves and their own histories. It demonstrates that family is built through presence and loyalty rather than bloodlines alone, a truth that resonates with anyone who has experienced loss, estrangement, or the unexpected grace of people who simply showed up when they were needed. It shows through Rex and Travis that healing rarely begins with words. It begins with small, quiet, chosen acts of trust. A child reaching out a hand, a dog choosing to stay still, a man raising his hands gently in surrender. Emotional safety is built slowly, and this story honors that truth with patience and care. And finally, it reminds every viewer that purpose is not found in grand gestures. It is found when we stop running and simply show up for the people, the places, and the second chances that were quietly, patiently waiting for us all along.